You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous. Her loyalty is only to the family she serves. A midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were wild.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Wild podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and today I have with me Jordan. Jordan, will you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, my name is Jordan Dizon. I am a birth doula and lactation support specialist. I've been doing this for 3 years now, and have had the privilege of serving many families through all different types of birth journeys, and I just absolutely love what I do.
Well, the question we always have is, how did you get to be doing what you do? Like, where did
Yeah,
your journey begin?
so actually, I would say that I fell in love with birth work or the idea of birth work after I had my son. I had a great pregnancy with him, a great birth experience. I was even able to catch him myself. Like it was
Mhm.
just incredible, unmedicated birth. Didn't have a doula. Wasn't really I didn't really even know what a doula was. And I also was a first time mom. Of course, I didn't really know what I didn't know at the time. So I didn't know what to look out for or anything like that. And after I had my son, we were getting ready to be discharged from the hospital the day after, just, a little bit early. We were feeling confident about going home with him. And his oxygen level was tested, just the regular routine kind of procedures were done, and they found that his oxygen level had dropped to 83%.
Mhm.
And so obviously he had to be transferred to the NICU because his oxygen saturation was very well under what it should have been. And my son is Filipino, so he had pretty dark skin when he was born, and it's hard to see, I think, with melanated babies, purpling or bluing around their lips, signs of poor oxygen. So I think that that's kind of what really sprung me into the whole advocacy world, because I think that if I had known what to look out for a little bit more, that situation could have been avoided. And so I'm kind of now working to push for policy changes in hospitals with routine checks for all babies, just because the morbidity and mortality rate of melanated babies is so much higher. And I think that that's one of the things that really affects that. So that's kind of where my journey started. My son was in the NICU for, I believe it was 2 weeks. We weren't allowed to see him because of COVID restrictions and all that stuff.
Well,
That was really, really difficult. Yeah, we were only able to see him over FaceTime.
w-
I was able to, luckily, pump and deliver to the hospital, and I would have a nurse that would meet me outside of the hospital to bring the milk in, and he was able to drink my milk, which was incredible. We didn't have to supplement with formula at all, which is crazy and unheard of. And then we were able to take him home after that. But that really sparked my desire to be an advocate for moms that maybe, especially first time moms, you don't know anything really going into it unless you have somebody walking through that season of life with you. And I just wanted to be able to be that for someone else. And
so
maybe like that.
when
January 3rd, 2022.
so like even like
Or
2
2022.
year, like it wasn't even
Yeah.
the height of COVID. Wow.
No. Yeah, so we were I had tested positive upon arrival to the birth center for like a convalescent COVID positive status. So I had had COVID in November, like the end of November, and I guess I still had some type of something in my system. And so because of that convalescent positive status, we were not able to see him in the hospital or hold him or anything. It was really, really hard. But my midwives were incredible, and they fought for us to be able to see him. A couple of days before we were even when they were about to retest me, the midwives actually got us into the hospital to be able to see him. So that was really incredible. They were amazing.
Wow, I feel like that's criminal.
It was really hard.
Wow, that's so intense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, well then
Mhm.
you're home and then what? Where's your journey go from
So
there?
I spoke with my sister a little bit, and she agreed, like, hey, I think doula work might be kind of your avenue. And so I found a certification course through DONA, and I took it one weekend and just like fell in love with birth work. It's just one of those things where I kind of was like in the course learning all this information. It was a ton of information because it was only a weekend certification course, 12-hour days or something like that. And it was so much information being thrown at me, but I just felt like I couldn't get enough of those. It was just like, yeah, that instant love for all of it, from policy to, how to support people when they're in during pregnancy or when they're in labor or postpartum, and just all of it, just so interesting to me. I loved it. So after that, I decided to continue my education through Drexel School of Medicine and their IBCLC program. So that's where I'm at now. And I love that as well. I mean, breastfeeding is so incredible. I mean, it's just such interesting information. I feel like there's so much that I still don't know, which is always a fun place to be.
I know, and I feel like in, 20 years from now, we'll have a whole set of new information that we give parents.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
There's never a dull moment in birth work either, because every day is so different. Every birth is so different, and just the ways that you have to kind of show up to serve the people that you have in that community is just, it's always very unique to each family, and it's amazing. Never gets old.
Yeah. Okay. I need to go back to the NICU. Did they ever tell you, other than low oxygen, like why low oxygen? What was wrong? What did they need to do for him? Supplement?
They really didn't have an answer. And so that was another really frustrating part of that journey. Yeah, it was really difficult, because it would be like one day he'd be doing really good and they'd be really, just very hopeful and positive about him getting out sooner. And then the next day it'd be like, we don't have any answers. His oxygen levels are dropping again. We have to go back to the nose cannula and all that stuff. So they did a bunch of tests. They did, echocardiograms. They did everything you can think of, and just nothing came back. But I think it really, if I'm being honest, the birthing center that I birthed through is closed down now. And so that kind of set awful some alarms, I think, in my head when I heard that they were going through that process. I do remember them weighing him after I had him, and he was one weight, and then a few hours later they weighed him again, and he was a completely different weight, like maybe I think it was like they weighed him first and he was like 7 pounds 5 ounces, and then the next time they weighed him he was 8 pounds 1 ounce. It's like
Whoa.
a huge discrepancy
And,
hours later.
and you don't go up usually once you're born.
Exactly. You usually go down and then you take like a little while to go back up. So that was kind of a red flag for me as well. And the same machine that they use to take the birth weight is, of course, the same machine that they use to take pulse ox. And so I don't know if it was maybe that situation where they told me, oh, the machine just probably wasn't calibrated correctly. This is probably more likely his birth weight. So like, I don't know if it was that, or if it was because they couldn't really see signs that they would normally, that would normally prompt them to test for oxygen, the pulse ox level. So we don't really know still to this day what it was, but now I get to at least take that experience into my births. And, that's one of the first things I usually look for, especially with my melanated babies, because it's too common. It's too common of an issue. So I
Well,
just feel like at least I'm able to.
just in case this is new information for you, in our practice, if we ever have a baby with low oxygen levels, one of the first things we recommend to parents is a chiropractic adjustment.
Yes.
We, see amazing results with that. If there's just like something a little off, affecting the nerves, it can really help babies. So that's usually one of our first go-tos is let's get them adjusted and see if things resolve. And if not, we'll dig deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I got into kind of the holistic community after I had my son as well, and I think that would have really helped me during that time period, but it's something that I recommend to all of my clients. And now it's just like, hey, let's expand this. And chiropractic care can really, really help baby after birth, but also can help you during your whole pregnancy. And just, bringing holistic care into the whole entire pregnancy and postpartum journey, I think really, really helps people kind of get back into like the groove of things, especially after they have the baby. But I don't think a lot of people realize how beneficial chiropractic care is for newborns as well. Craniosacrofacial therapy, things like that. These are all things that can really help, because if we really think about it, babies are kind of going through their own traumatic experience during birth. They're kind of contorted, and their bodies are kind of being pushed this way and that. And so it's really nice to help them kind of readjust and get more acclimated to the world around them in that way. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah. So when you're working with families, I've heard you mention a few times like holistic health and wellness. What do you recommend for your family? Is like what pieces do you help educate about?
Yeah, that's a great question. During my prenatal appointments, even, as early as the first one, I like to kind of set my clients up with either, a holistic healthcare practitioner, nutrition response testing, or an endocrinologist if they're more of like a, Western medicine type family. I love kind of getting those appointments set in stone for after their due date, just usually because sometimes it takes a while to get them in with practitioners like that, especially if it's an endocrinologist. But I think that a lot of the things that we see postpartum can actually be maybe not completely avoided, but can be a bit more preventable if we kind of address the hormone imbalance that happens postpartum, because that really is the most prevalent thing that I think causes the most issues is the hormone. Your hormones are up here when you're pregnant, and then as soon as you have your baby and that placenta detaches from, the walls, you just like those hormones are just dropping down, and we need to figure out a way to regulate them. And I think that that would help a lot with postpartum depression, postpartum rage, postpartum anxiety, because a lot of that I think is tied to hormone imbalance, of course. So that's something that I really push, even as early as my first prenatal appointment with clients. Is
So
a
can
big
you
one.
speak a little bit more to those things? Like if somebody is like nutrition response medicine, like what does that even mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually found out about nutrition response testing just a few years ago from my sister as well. She's very from Root and Restore, anybody's local to the South Jersey area. And so basically they kind of like they do muscle testing. And I guess the thought behind it is that like if you're, say there's something going on with your stomach and we're pushing down on your stomach and you're trying to push down on my hand at the same time that somebody's pressing on your stomach, if that area has an issue, you're not going to be able to focus on pushing my hand down. You're going to be mostly focused on protecting that area that's in pain or that has some issues going on. So it's kind of your body's way of talking to the practitioner, your central nervous system's way of communicating with the practitioner about what's going on and what areas need to be addressed. So that's really, really helpful. And then, craniosacral therapy is, I would say they kind of like pretty much go hand in hand. That's a lot of fascial work. And that helps a lot with like trauma, which I have a lot of moms that have gone through like things like sexual trauma, and that can really, really affect a pregnancy. I don't think people realize how much that can affect pregnancy and birth. I've seen a lot of moms like as soon as their baby, as soon as they have their baby, you're supposed to be flooded with all these happy hormones, and you're overwhelmed with emotion, and it's this big beautiful thing. And I think I can tell always when somebody's gone through some type of trauma because of the way that they react after they have their baby, and it's like they're almost dissociated, like they're just not even there, and it takes them a while to get back to that, like, hey, let's come back to reality. So I think that craniosacral therapy really helps work a lot of that, because it's like your body saves up that trauma. And so like even in a car accident, you go through something traumatic like a car accident, and then every time a car in front of you slams on their brakes, it's almost like your body tenses up, like your body remembers that. And I mean, if you've ever read the body keeps the score, or body keeps the score, that whole theory it's definitely, there's a lot of weight behind that. So I think that these practices can help. I mean, not to say that have to have significant trauma to do craniosacral therapy. It's actually just a really great way of like, even if your baby has a tongue tie or a lip tie, that's a great way of working that out. OT, some stretches that you can do to help baby sleep better and have less gas or colic and all that stuff. So it's definitely helpful in a bunch of different ways. But I think that those are things that I love to recommend to my clients because they're just super helpful. And not many people know that they even exist, that there's even that option to work through things that way. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of like the breastfeeding, what are your main tips and advice for mamas who are, maybe it's going to be their first baby, not really sure what to expect, or they had struggles last time?
Yeah. Especially with the moms who've had struggles in the past breastfeeding, I always love to remind my clients that every experience with every baby is going to be different. You're not going to be guaranteed to have the same experience. Even if you had a great milk supply your first baby, I'm not going to sit there and tell my client like, hey, you might have a low supply this time. But just to remind them like, hey, every breastfeeding experience is different with every baby. And you have to give yourself grace and give the baby grace going into that experience, because I think that obviously a lot of breastfeeding is instinctual, of course, but at the same time, it's also a challenge. It's a real challenge. I think that not a lot of people, enough people talk about how challenging breastfeeding is. And to some people, it really doesn't come naturally. It's, the baby has these instincts, but they don't know how to use them. And we're both learning together. Mom and baby are both learning together at the same time. So again, just heavy on the giving yourself grace and giving the baby grace to kind of learn this experience together. But I would say that breastfeeding is one of those things where I want to make sure that my clients have a lactation plan going into, like, before we even go into labor, before we, while we're still pregnant, we're going to work on the breastfeeding, the lactation plan. We're going to make sure that mom and dad are on the same page, because I think that a lot of times the partner is a big influence on can be a big influence on formula feeding. And so, and again, there's nothing inherently wrong about formula feeding. If the baby's getting fed, then, that's what's important. I know that a lot of moms have this crazy mom guilt surrounding, formula feeding or supplementing with formula, whatever the case is. I do think that, modern medicine, we kind of like push formula feeding a little bit too hard. I think it's more of like, it's become somewhat of like a cop out of like, hey, if we just push formula feeding, we don't have to focus so much on the breastfeeding issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that moms need a little bit more support with breastfeeding, because obviously that's usually the goal. I mean, I agree with you. I think that a lot of interventions are abused, overused, when they don't have to be, because
if she just had extra support, she maybe didn't need that. And sometimes you do need it, but a lot of times what you really needed was support.
Exactly. And the right support coming from the right place and the right, the right voices, I think is the biggest part of that. Honestly, we treat birth like it's a medical emergency when it's a natural, beautiful, intimate event like that we get to experience. You know what I mean? And so I think that is where people go wrong today, because I think if it's crazy, because a lot of people hear the words unmedicated birth or natural birth or physiological birth, and they think, why would you want to do that? Because it's just so taboo. I think luckily we're kind of going back to the roots in that aspect. We're kind of, more people are questioning, wait, why have we always done it this way? Or why has this become so popular when this has so many more benefits? And so luckily we're kind of making our way back there, but we got to a place, I think, where it's become so taboo to just let our body do what it does. And that is, I think when I realized that, I was like, whoa, like what do we do?
Yeah. I was talking to somebody
and I think
recently about like the idea of comfort and how we are so used to always being as comfortable as we possibly can. Like like we really don't have a lot of the hardships that they had, hundreds of years ago. We do live in this like life of luxury for the most part. And I feel like it trickles into whenever things get hard, we feel like that means something's wrong and we have to make it easy. And I hear my husband all the time now saying to my kids, like, you got to do one hard thing a day, one hard thing a day, just getting us back to that, like, discomfort doesn't mean something is wrong necessarily. And it could be something that you could be proud of later.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I think that there's, obviously I've supported moms that have had cesarean sections. I've supported moms that have gotten the epidural. I've supported moms that do it unmedicated. And I'm not gonna tell anybody, this is exactly how you should have your birth, and this is what it should look like. Because of course, your perfect birth is a birth that you're confident in, you feel empowered going into. And so, I mean, who am I to say what is going to make that happen for you?
Totally.
But I will say there's something so incredible about watching a mom have her baby, and just like, especially being a doula, like you are existing in the same space as someone who is stepping from a woman to a mom, and you're watching that, and it's just so incredible. Like, and especially, when it comes to unmedicated physiological birth, it's just like, it's so incredible to watch them go to the absolute end of their threshold and make it, and still make it over. You know what I mean? It's just so incredible. It's such a gift to be able to exist in that space. But I think with anything that comes, birth or breastfeeding, anything like that. I think you're right. I think we are so used to being comfortable. And I tell my clients this all the time. Usually in their the prenatal that we do right before their due date, I'm always telling them like, hey, I know we want to be comfortable. We want to get, there's going to be a time where you just want to get into a comfortable position. But when we get comfortable, that's when things kind of slow down. Things aren't progressing. Like if we're feeling super, super comfortable and we're not feeling intense waves of pressure or anything like that, we're not progressing. So we have to move to a different position. We have to try something different because the goal is not to keep you in labor forever, which won't happen. But the goal is to get to have your baby. And so you don't have to do this anymore. You know what I mean? We can be done. As soon as you allow yourself to get into that space where you're okay with being uncomfortable, that's where the progress happens. And that's where the growth happens. I feel like you're watching someone go through so much growth, like even just like mental and psychological growth when they're in labor. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It is uncomfortable. Birth is uncomfortable. Pregnancy is uncomfortable. Breastfeeding is uncomfortable. But there's such reward to that discomfort, and you grow so much as a person going through all of those seasons.
Yeah, whenever moms are like, "What position should I do?" or they want like advice, we're like, "The toilet, you're gonna
Yeah, sensation.
again." We're like, "Just give it 3 surges. Let's see how it goes." And
Absolutely.
yeah, I feel like because of my birth experiences, I can relate to what a lot of moms go through because I had my son at home in the water, and then I had a C-section with my daughter. I got, donor milk and supplemented with formula with my son, and I breastfed my daughter for 2.5 years. So I, feel like I have these range of experiences to be like, there's no one right way. It's just
Absolutely.
about knowing what all the options are and yeah, building that support team to show up for the way you're wanting to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, you want your clients to feel empowered going into their birth, and you want them to feel confident and comfortable going into their birth about what they're deciding. So I think it's really about, like, as birth workers, our job really is to present them with all of the information so that they can make an educated and informed decision for themselves and for their babies, because you're teaching them how to advocate for their families. Really, in pregnancy, they're going to be doing that for the rest of their lives. We can be involved with our clients' lives like, forever. I have clients that, I'm like an aunt to their baby now. And like, it's amazing because I was there for their birth. And that's incredible. But they're the ones that are going to be advocating for their families. So just teaching them how to look at all of the information, look at all of the evidence, look at the pros and the cons, weigh them out, and make your own informed decision going into your birth. That's where, that's where the power comes from. That's where the magic happens, I think. It's
Yeah,
really cool. Yeah.
definitely. What about, I had written a note about iron and vitamin A. Is that something that you talk about?
I talk about iron a lot with my clients. I actually have had a couple clients that have been through iron transfusions when they were pregnant, which was a crazy experience. Yeah, I think iron is obviously one of the things that can help us a lot just in general. I think that a lot of women are just deficient in general. But yeah, that's definitely something that I push a lot with my clients. I think a lot of them take prenatals and they think that, suffices for, their allotted iron dosage. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I always recommend beef liver
Hmm.
in replacement of a prenatal, because I just feel like it's just nature's prenatal, like it's just nature's vitamin, and it just has everything that you need in there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, I definitely recommend that sort of thing to all of my clients. But yeah.
Some people are worried about like too much vitamin A or overdosing, and they have like questions about that. Do any of your clients have questions about that, and how do you address it?
Yeah, I definitely have had clients that are worried about, over supplementing. And I would just say, I mean, I'm a big proponent on, maybe this makes me like the black sheep of the crunchy community, but I'm definitely a big proponent on blood work, especially if you're going to like holistic healthcare practitioners and stuff like that, so they know, where you should be, and it's not just like a money maker where they just want you to take everything and be on everything. But I think that there's a lot of positives to that. Just testing where your levels are at and just being able to safely supplement. I think that's very important, because I do agree. I think the crunchy community has their heart in the right place,
Mhm.
where we're trying to balance everything ourselves and just kind of like meet our body where it's at. I think that a lot of these things that we're supplementing with, we can get nutritionally. And I think I would always push that before I would push supplementation. But yeah, I think it's definitely important to safely supplement and just to know where your body's at with these things before you go and do all of that on your own.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your e-courses that you have coming up.
I am so excited. I've been developing two e-courses right now. One is for expecting parents, and it's great. I mean, even if you've had a baby before, it's a really great refresher course, and it just kind of goes through all of the different things from pregnancy all the way until breastfeeding and postpartum and building your support system, building your village. We have lactation plan printables for people and birth plan printables, and it's just very interactive. And so I'm really excited about that. And everyone who takes the e-course is also invited into my Facebook community of moms, which I think is really helpful too, because we're kind of all like-minded in the holistic community. And so we're all kind of giving each other suggestions on things. And this is where I go for for my care for my child, or this is, the vitamin K drops that I use for my baby. All of those things are in that community, and it's really great. And then I also have one for birth workers and people that exist in the birth space, whether it's midwives, whether it's OBs, whether it's labor and delivery nurses. Because I think that I've worked with a lot of labor and delivery nurses specifically, and OBs, and I've had the privilege of having like a really great experience with all of them. And they kind of let me exist in their space, and that's kind of how I look at it. But I've also had a lot of friends within the doula community that have not so great experiences with OBs and labor and delivery nurses. And I think that if people that exist in that space understand why a lot of moms are moving to more unmedicated births and physiological labors and all of these things, I think it would help them to kind of be able to look at it differently, and then we can all kind of show up better for the people that we're serving within this space. And so I wrote that e-course with a heart of like, I just want you guys to see where we're coming from. And I want you to see why maybe it's okay to question some of the things that are standard practice, because potentially, we have things that we used to do years ago that now we're like, we would never do that.
Mhm.
Dentists smoking in the dentist's office while they're doing a cleaning. Now we're like, what were we doing? How is that allowed? So I think that, the thing about modern medicine, the thing about, just science in general is just that we're always learning new things. There's always developments
Mhm.
happening. And so I think that now that we're kind of getting more leaning more into the space of coming back to physiological birth, I think that it's really important to help people understand why, and why it could be harmful, actually, some of the practices that we're doing and the pelvic positioning that we're pushing. You know what I mean? So those kind of things are in that e-course. And I think I'm hoping that it's received well. And I'm hoping to be able to kind of get into a couple local hospitals and offer some free classes for birth workers as well. I'm really excited about it.
Nice. I've heard you say a couple times lactation plan, and I think a lot of people are really familiar with birth plan. We sometimes talk a little bit about like a postpartum plan, which sometimes includes, plans for lactation. But when you say lactation plan, what are you creating with families?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I've really, really found has been the most challenging for most of my moms is not birth, it's lactation, it's breastfeeding. And the feeling of not being adequate or having an adequate supply, I think that that is the most challenging, especially because you're going through that at a time where you're so emotionally vulnerable. And so feeling like you're not producing enough to feed your baby and to sustain your baby, that is a terrifying and heartbreaking feeling. And so I want to prepare my moms and let them know that a lot of the things that they know about breastfeeding are maybe not completely accurate. The things that you see in movies and TV shows aren't really the most accurate data, surprisingly enough. And so I think it's important to kind of get everybody on the same page about, hey, this is what we want to do. This is how long I plan to breastfeed for. This is how, I feel about formula supplementation. This is what would cause me to, like, I would have to get to this point in order to supplement with formula. Before formula, are we considering donor milk? Are we considering, something like that? Or, I know Medela just released a revolutionary nipple shield that allows you to see your milk flowing as you're feeding the baby. Incredible. I think that that's going to help a lot of moms who are struggling to thinking that they don't have an adequate supply. Weighted feeds, all of these things are things that a lot of moms don't even know exist until after they have their baby, and they're already supplementing with formula because we have the growth charts that we're trying to match,
Mhm.
and we're trying to fit every baby into this same growth chart, which is wild in my opinion, just absolutely wild, because every baby is a different human, so we're not going to all grow at the same rate and at the same, and so these are all things that we talk about in usually our last prenatal appointments. So all the information is very, fresh in our minds going into it. We talk about like how much milk a baby can fit in their belly, even just in the first couple of days. Because a lot of moms think, something that I've seen is that when moms supplement with formula in the hospital for whatever reason, they are given these formula bottles that are like, yay big, and they're feeding the baby, and they're thinking that the baby has to consume this entire bottle first day of life, because if not, they're going to be hungry, and oh my gosh, why isn't my baby finishing this bottle? So now we're force feeding all of this formula into a baby's belly that can only handle a few drops realistically of milk the first day of life. And so now we're stretching the baby's stomach. The baby's screaming and got crazy gas pains and super colicky or whatever the case is. And now the baby is expecting this much milk every feed. So now we do have moms that they don't have an adequate supply because we are feeding them too much for their bodies. They can't handle that
It's
amount.
like birth, the whole like vicious cycle of
It
intervention
is.
and yeah.
Yeah, and then we have moms that are doing great breastfeeding and they're feeling really confident about it, and then their baby starts to cluster feed. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, my baby's not getting enough milk because it's always hungry, because it always wants to be on me." And I'm like, "That's developmental and that's totally normal. It's your baby telling your body it's time to produce a little bit more because I'm about to go through a growth spurt and I'm going to need some more milk." And so preparing them for these things ahead of time helps them to understand that their body is doing exactly what it needs to do. They're producing exactly what their baby needs, and that they're okay.
Yeah,
Everything's
I would
okay.
say like, oh yeah, you probably don't have enough milk, but they're gonna fix that.
They're gonna fix it, exactly. The baby will tell your body how much milk that's, and it all comes together as long as you're being consistent and you have the support that you need. I think that's the most important thing too, because without that support, especially like I said, going through the postpartum array of emotions that change from day to day, and just having a newborn, and especially when you're going into that situation for the first time and you're just dealing with the sleep deprivation, all these things, and then you're trying to sustain your baby on top of that and worried that you're not good enough for your baby. We don't want that. So that's something that I really like to kind of formulate a plan going into it and make sure that my parents feel very, very educated and empowered going into breastfeeding. And I even help them, learn how to latch a baby on. I got a little model and I got a little baby doll, and we practice latching beforehand so that they know what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to feel like. And yeah, so get them just completely prepared in every sense for breastfeeding so that we have a really successful postpartum experience.
Are there any like lactation tools or things that one would purchase, whether it's a tool or a supplement or anything that you think like across the board is really great to have on hand? Because like when you need it kind of thing. Or are you kind of like, let's just see how this goes and whatever we need, we can get.
So I always like to have my moms purchase a manual pump, which I think are always very helpful to have. I know that everybody loves the plug in the wall pumps or the portable pumps that you can kind of bring anywhere with you. And I think that those are great. But when you're first establishing your milk supply in the very beginning, you want a pump that's going to have good suction. You want a pump that's going to be reliable. And so I think that the manual pump really does that. But I think really hand expression, it's not so much it's more of a tool. I would say it's less of a,
Yeah, a technique.
a technique. I think that it is so underused but so incredibly helpful. I mean, you can get more milk from hand expressing than you could from your average pump, and people think it's crazy when you say something like that, but pumping, you're only utilizing one portion of milk removal technique, right? So you're just using the stimulation. But when you're breastfeeding a real baby, the baby is grabbing your breasts. They're grabbing a lot of breast tissue. They're doing almost their own breast massage. So they're stimulating your milk ducts to make more, to have the letdown. And then they're also utilizing that suction or suckling pattern to remove the milk. And so hand expression does both. You're waking up those milk ducts and telling them, hey, it's time. And then you're also utilizing that suckling or suction pattern to remove the milk. And so I think that that's really helpful after a feed to do that if you're trying to boost milk supply after a pumping session to kind of get, get some extra out and just, again, build your milk supply. I think that is like one of the most underused tools. And I definitely always love to teach my clients that they feel prepared.
Yeah. What are your thoughts around colostrum harvesting? That's like the new rage
Oh,
right now.
it is the new rage. So this one's, yeah, I have a lot of moms who naturally just are leaking colostrum, as soon as it comes in. And then I have some moms that they don't see a drop of it until they're in the hospital. I think that it's helpful just because when you are, you can always bring the colostrum with you to the hospital when you have your baby. And that helps with regulating their sugars. That helps with mouth colonization of good bacteria. So it's helping with the gut microbiome. So it's helping you in all of those areas. So that's always helpful to have, definitely. I don't think people should be so stressed out about it if they're not seeing colostrum, just because you're putting a lot of pressure on your body to do something that technically it doesn't need to be doing until you have your baby. And it's there. I mean, if your body is growing a baby, your body is getting ready to produce. And so I think that a lot of moms say stuff like, oh, I just only see like a couple drops of colostrum. Maybe my milk is just like not coming in yet. If you're seeing colostrum, your milk has come in. That's the first milk. So it's there. But like if you're not seeing it until the baby's born, I always kind of have my clients hand express a little bit before I leave the hospital and get the baby latched on, so we can see and I can show them, hey, you've got some colostrum here, you're good, things are good, baby's getting fed. But yeah, I mean, I don't put a ton of pressure on my clients to be harvesting colostrum. If you see it and it shows up, awesome. If it leaks into your nursing pads, great, freeze them. You can use them on the baby's skin after the baby's born and all that good stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's great, but it also can add a little extra level of pressure to the moms that aren't really seeing anything. So,
If it's there, catch it.
it's there. It's there, catch it. Don't let it go to waste for sure. But if you don't see it, don't stress out about it.
Well, is there anything we haven't touched on that you really want to cover before we end?
Ooh, tricky question. No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of areas. This was awesome. I'm so happy that you guys reached out to me. I'm so excited to be on the podcast.
Well, for anyone listening, can you tell them how they can connect with you? We'll definitely leave it in the show notes.
Yeah, so you can connect with me by directly emailing me at wellnessandwomb@outlook.com or on my social media platform on Instagram, Wellness and Womb as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting some people.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA, Sophia at sophiabirth.com, and me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth. We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always, stay wild.